Hi, welcome to today's video. My name's Paul. So today I'm going to be doing a soft pastel impressionist landscape. And you can see the pastels that I will be using. At least I'm using some of these pastels. Some of them you can see are thicker, sort of rounded. Those are the soft pastels. Those are made by a company called Schmincke. The other ones, the longer, thinner, slightly squarish ones, those are Conte pastels. The difference is the Conte pastels are much harder. I don't really use the Conte pastels for landscape painting. I would use them more if I was doing some sketching or drawing, maybe some life drawing or something like that. Something that requires more detail and more control. It's quite difficult to get fine details with the soft pastels. They don't have that level of control, partly because they're quite chunky. They don't really have a sharp edge. And if you try and put pressure on them, they're liable to just crumble away into dust. And at the end of the day, that's all a pastel painting is really. It's just colored dust sitting on the surface or in the fibers of the paper or the coating that's on the paper. This particular paper is called, well, the name of the paper is Pastelmat. And it is a coated paper. I don't know exactly what it's coated with, but whatever it is able to hold on to some of that dust from the pastel sticks. And you're able to build up layers, so you can put down one color and then put another color on top of that. And I'm not an expert on soft pastel painting, but what I've discovered so far is that's maybe the way to go, is building up layers. And then I use this sort of blending in between the layers. I have heard some people say that you shouldn't blend the soft pastels like this. They're saying that the soft pastels, the dust from the soft pastels is made up of little crystals. And when you blend like that, when you smudge with your hand or something, you're crushing those little crystals, so you're losing some of the optical properties of the pastel painting. I don't know if that's correct or not. It's just some things I've heard and read about pastel painting. But so far I haven't figured out how to create skies without doing at least some blending. Like I say, this painting is an impressionist painting. And then you could ask, well, what do I mean when I say an impressionist painting? Sort of what is impressionism? Or at least sort of partly answer that. Impressionism, one of the things that separated Impressionism from other forms of art was the use of color. To give you an example, I remember one time I was outside painting and a man and a woman were coming past, husband and wife, or I don't know, whatever. Anyway, they sort of came over, or at least the woman came over. The man didn't really interact. But the woman, maybe she had some interest in art or studying art or something, but she was asking quite a few questions. One of the questions she asked was, how was I going to paint the stones? And what I was painting was, if you know, for example, Stonehenge, these standing stones or stone circles, and there are thousands of sites like these all across Britain, Ireland, and northwest France. So anyway, I was at one of these sites, not far from where I live in Belfast, and yeah, she was asking how I was going to paint the stones. So I asked her, well, what do you mean? And she says, well, you don't have grey pastels. So I asked her, well, if you look at the stones, what colours can you see? And the thing is, when you really look, there's all kinds of colours in there. There's pinks and yellows and purples and blues and all kinds of things. And I think that's what separates Impressionism from some of the other forms of art, especially when it comes to landscape painting. The Impressionists saw colors. The more classically trained artists, I don't know, didn't see or couldn't see. So, for example, one of the things that Monet tried to get across was that shadows are not black. Shadows can be lots of different colors, depending on the light that's coming in, depending on what the light is, what the shadow is falling on. All of those things can have an effect on the colors that you see in the shadows. So that's partly what Impressionism is. In addition to that sort of Impressionist style, my painting is also influenced by some of the post-Impressionist artists like Van Gogh and Gauguin, who use colors not just in a representational way, but colors are part of your feelings towards the landscape, your emotions, and also it will influence the people who are viewing your painting, the final painting, how they maybe feel about things, how they feel about what they're looking at. So that use of color is quite different from a more classical approach. So in the end, and you'll see in a minute or two the final painting, it's quite colorful. Now this isn't really a how-to video, it's not a tutorial on how to paint with soft pastels. Apart from anything else, I'm still learning myself. I wouldn't be in a position to teach other people how to use soft pastels. But one thing I would point out maybe is, and it's the same when I'm doing watercolor landscapes, it's not big blocks of color. You can see there's lots of little patches of color. And sometimes that can be a useful way of breaking up the landscape. One of the problems with some landscapes is you end up with these big flat plains of color, which can be good if you use them correctly, but they can also make a painting quite boring to look at. If you break things up, and if you go out, again, if you go out and look at, say, a field, you'll see that the grass isn't all one color. There's different colors in there. So breaking things up into different patches of color can just add a bit more interest to the painting. This is a scan of the final painting. Like I say, quite colorful. I was pleased with this painting. I quite like it. I like the use of colors. I like the feeling of depth. There's a bit of depth in the landscape. And I like the sky. So yeah, overall I was happy with this one. Okay, if you'd like to subscribe, just click on the big red subscribe button below, and hopefully see you in the next video.